Here we go. We
There
got
we
it.
go. You
So
got it.
we'll do it live to talk about the process of going from USL 2, a team 5 years at the USL 2 level. Thankful to say I was actually at the very first Fort Wayne FC game here in Michigan. But to talk about the process as it's happening, going from an amateur team to professional ranks, FC sporting director for Fort Wayne FC, Oliver Gage. Thank you. Eventually, onto the show here, sir.
No problem, mate. You never have to apologize for not being able to make me big on the screen. I think that'll save everybody's eyes and ears the less they see of me and hear of me. But I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and I try and be as open and transparent as I can around all these matters. I think a lot of people in soccer, football are a little bit too guarded at times and think that they have this magic secret sauce they don't want to give away. And then the longer you're in it, the more you realize a lot of people are doing some very similar stuff. So
Yeah,
try and be open when I can.
everyone's got the secret sauce, right?
Yeah, me myself included. Hey, when you're interviewing for jobs, you've always got the secret sauce, so.
And I understand that. Welcome to the program. Thank you for spending time on Morning Kickaround. But I understand you already know our guest co-host Brooks Laimbeer from previous encounters.
I do, yes. Me and Brooks have interacted a good few times over the years, so I was going to
Yeah,
mention that myself, actually.
yeah. MLS
So
Combine back in the day, right? I think
Yeah,
2015 or 16 when you were with Houston.
yeah, I'm showing my age. It's my birthday yesterday. Sorry, the day before yesterday. So I'm feeling very old now when you talk about being in combines literally 10 years ago.
Right, right. I feel
Well, happy belated birthday to you, Oliver. Amongst the fascinating things of the moment, there's a lot of amateur sides elsewhere across the country getting big crowds and kind of feeling some pressure to maybe go pro. But with Fort Wayne, it seemed, from my understanding, there was kind of always the intention to go there. But right now, I'm seeing from the Fort Wayne FC uh, social media platforms that you guys are kind of like preparing fans and the public in Fort Wayne to kind of almost like educate them. This is what we've been doing. We've been having the short season. Now we're going to do this long professional season. Kind of like I want to hear from you. Like, what are you doing? And what is the club doing right now to bridge that gap between amateur soccer and pro soccer?
Yeah, I mean the good thing about the club at the moment, and one of the extreme positives that I saw when looking at this opportunity is, although it has been for the last several years a USL 2 team, uh, behind the scenes, it's been as good, if not better, than a lot of the pro teams in the country. So when you look at the infrastructure behind the scenes, the staffing levels, the support that the players get, it's truly like blown me away just how much is there kind of bubbling under the surface at the football club in Fort Wayne. The way they, feed the players, the way they support them off the pitch with medical, with the sports science, data, all this type of thing. I mean, quite literally on my, kind of getting to know the club in my first couple of weeks, I was looking at staffing structures and who's in place. And and I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, like Fort Wayne and USL 2 have got more staff than Loudoun United had in the USL Championship when I was there, recently. So Fort Wayne, the football team, is ready for this. And having obviously been at some of the USL 2 games this year, I'm encouraged. I think the town's ready too. It's going to be a really exciting time. A new stadium is coming. It's going to be incredible. Like, you should see the mock-ups of this thing. It's going to be very impressive. So I think the town's ready. I'm really excited for it.
Go ahead, Brooks.
yeah. So I mean, Ali, you've been a part of clubs that have already been around and you've built teams. Explain the difference between building a team that's been around and then building a team that's just really coming into the pro level.
Yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. There's pros and cons to both. A team that's been around. So for anyone who doesn't know, my role before this was with Loudoun United. I was made sporting director there with an existing team. And naturally, what you get with an existing team with 20 odd players signed is some players that you really like and you really like the deal they're on, and some players that you kind of look at things and you're like, okay, this is one that we probably aren't going to stick with in the long term. The benefit of that is you maybe only have 5 or 6 contracts to do in the off season. A brand new team, you've got incredible opportunity because you've got 20 roster spots up for grabs. But then there's also a risk with that. When you sign 20 players in an off season, it's going to be impossible to hit on all 20. And if you can get to the point where 13, 14, 15 of them heading into year 2, you're really happy with, like, that's a home run. So I think naturally, with an expansion roster, with an expansion team, you see not just opportunity, but probably some turnover in the first couple of years. And then things settle down a little bit, and you get into your rhythm, and you have your playing style established, and you can point to say that's a Fort Wayne player right there. We know he's a Fort Wayne player, and obviously this is where we talk about the secret sauce, what that exactly is, and how we find them, and the data, and all that type of stuff is what comes, and that's some of the support I'll be bringing the staff on the ground. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty monumental challenge putting together an expansion roster.
Yeah, zooming out just a little bit for those viewing who aren't familiar with the Fort Wayne project, is they've been USL 2 since 2021. For large parts of the time, DeMarcus Beasley, former United States national team legend, really, is one of the folks pushing this project, or one of the founding voices and folks behind this. So now, not only is Fort Wayne FC realizing that project of pro soccer in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but there's also going to be a soccer stadium. They've broken ground on that. There is a construction site of a soccer specific stadium for you there, right?
Yeah, I mean, broken ground is definitely one term for it. I was at the stadium site a couple of weeks ago, and there are machines flying all over the place there. That thing's going up quick. I expected to go and see like a little bit of dirt over here and whatever. I went, and it was crazy. There was a million diggers and things getting dropped off and steel beams going up and stuff. So it's not just broken ground anymore. I think there's talk of kind of like a live stream at some point going up, but it's going to be ready, I think, in time for kickoff is what I heard, and that thing's going up quickly. Yeah, and it's going to be very, very impressive. I'm excited about it.
Ali, in terms of like the roster build, are you going to use a lot of local guys? You're going to try to do like Midwest, country, or are you going to try to anywhere all over the country? I know DeMarcus is from Fort Wayne. I'm sure you have Fort Wayne born players coming up through the academy into the first team. Can you kind of describe, the roster you're kind of looking to put together?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 answers to that question. If you ask me what it should look like in 5 years, I think it should be Indiana, Fort Wayne heavy on the domestic front. If you ask me what it looks like in year 1, maybe a little less, depending on how things go with the roster build. I think, not to get too deep and philosophical, but when you look at what a USL team should be, in my opinion, in American soccer, I think a USL team should represent its local community. Not just with the way the players carry themselves and what you do for your community with sponsorships and player events and stuff, but when you kind of step back and look at the purpose of what are we here for? What are we doing? What is Fort Wayne's legacy in their town? I think that it has to be a team that represents the Midwest and Indiana. Is there really a need for, 5 players from LA or the West Coast to be playing in Indiana when you've got USL teams over there to play their local guys? I'm not so sure. Certainly not en masse. If you saw a USL roster in 5 years' time in Fort Wayne that had no players from Indiana on it, I don't think we've succeeded in what our mission is here. Now, I'm not saying that we turn our back on it, or, we're happy with losing games and the players aren't good enough. We have a responsibility to build an academy that can produce USL level players and hopefully even higher and go on to play in Europe or MLS or wherever. But if we don't try and do that, I think we failed. If we just try and scoop up players from all over the country, no matter where they're from, and if they're from Indiana, great, but we're not going to try that hard to do that, I think that's a failure, personally. So yeah, the answer is eventually we want to be developing players in-house, and I think all USL teams should be. but it takes time. Player development is not just kind of, you don't just flick the switch and in a year's time you've got all these 18-year-olds coming out and they're all great. Like, it takes time. But yeah, we will be working very hard towards that.
So the Fort Wayne FC's final USL 2 season just wrapped up in July. So what does it look like now? Obviously, you said the stadium is being built, and you're working on finding some players or whatever. But what does actually happen right now? Was it like 5-6 months away from the first pro season?
Yeah, I mean, I literally logged out of a recruitment meeting with the staff and into this call. We're recruiting. We're planning who's going to go where and watch which games, who's going to be responsible more so for the international player pool versus the domestic, who's scouting college. We're kind of all hands to the pump on finding players for this roster right now. There's obviously a secondary trail where we're trying to build infrastructure and make sure that we've got our technology in place, our video analysis, our data, like all that type of stuff. But fundamentally, we're in recruitment mode and we're scouting players and we're working with agents and doing all the fun stuff behind the scenes to try and put a team on the field come March next year.
This is a bit of a general question, as you're obviously, into your ears with digging into the talent pool available at the USL 1 level. With there being so many more USL 1 teams coming into the fray in this year, is there a deep pool of players to sift through, or are you guys, all these new teams, all competing for the same guys?
It's a really good question, actually. I would be disappointed if we were all fighting over the same guys. And the reason for that being almost like what I talked about before is at the USL 1 level, there's a lot of players. There's 300 something NCAA programs, Division 1 programs alone. I would like to think that, the absolute top talent everyone's going to be aware of. Yeah, of course, everyone's going after them, or a lot of teams are going after them. But it's also a time of opportunity where, with so many expansion teams coming in, there's also so many roster spots available for the young American or international player to try and get their shot in the pros and make it, wherever they want to go in life. So I'd be disappointed if it was kind of like it felt like a finite pool of players and it was a race to the bottom with everybody scrambling to give them more money and more freedom and whatever and kind of all fighting for the same guys. I think now's the time when teams can put their stamp on what they want to be. Just as a tiny bit of insight, we just come off that recruitment meeting and we're going over all the USL 1 rosters and looking at age profiles, where they got their players from, who's done stuff we like and who has done stuff we maybe don't like so much. And the way I'm very impressed with the way AV Alta have put together their roster. They're quite young. They struggled a little bit at the start of the year, results wise, expansion team, bunch of young players, but they stuck with it. They didn't they didn't give up on what they were trying to do. Their form's got a little bit better recently, and they're doing great. And they're a young team. I'm really impressed with what they've done. So I think there's enough opportunity there for teams to do exactly what they want to do and not have to kind of go against their principles.
From an academy standpoint, you talked about you want to bring the locals in through the, they have to have a first team guy in the next, whatever, 3, 4, 5 years. Are you guys working with local clubs? And then what, you guys going to do ECNL, USL Academy? What would you guys look into to put your academy team in?
Yeah, so I'm not directly responsible for the academy build if we build an academy in its traditional form.
Yep.
I think I've also been someone through my career that's willing to kind of think outside the box a little bit. So when I was the head of football at the Canadian Premier League, the big question was, when is everyone going to have an academy?
Yeah.
And we looked at everything and said, we can have 8 academies for 8 clubs, or we can have 800 academies for 8 clubs and let the youth clubs in the area carry on doing what they're doing and build partnerships. When we say academy, I think it's probably a more accurate description to say kind of like player development funnel. Now, whether that is from 6 different clubs in the greater Fort Wayne area, or whether that's one club, which is, Fort Wayne's Academy, remains to be seen. But what I would say is, if you look at player pathways across the world now, the story of a kid getting signed at 8, 9 years old, going all the way through the same academy, becoming a player at 16, and like that doesn't happen as often as people think.
Yep.
Very, very often players that aren't in an academy team at 14 and 15 are the ones that make it. So when we build whatever the academy looks like, I think we just need to be aware that it's probably not just going to be kind of like Fort Wayne here, Fort Wayne, all the way up, So I think there's a lot of youth clubs in America that do a really good job. And there's a whole discussion around pay to play and all the rest of it. But in isolation, youth clubs do a really good job over here. And I would be disappointed if we just kind of like ignored all of that and blew the whole thing up and started causing, all these problems everywhere. So I'm very much kind of like, can we build symbiotic relationships with people and find ways to mutually benefit each other?
Yeah.
So for folks that are kind of following along this tale, what would be like the next thing to look out for? Is there an event or some tryouts, or like what's the next public event for people who really want to be as engaged as possible with Fort Wayne moving into this pro era?
Yeah, I think season ticket deposits are now open, which is always a great start, and it'll get me a pat on the back from the business team. Please go to the website and check out all of that. There's going to be a couple of fan nights coming up, I think, pub nights, all that type of thing, meet and greet, either the head coach or myself or whatever. We did discuss tryouts on this most recent call. We haven't got a date. We haven't got a structure. Again, one thing I would say is not to criticize. Try not to criticize.
Go ahead, by all means.
There was a time in American soccer where open tryouts were a great opportunity to take $250 off of every kid and get as many as you can there and see what happens, and also coincidentally make 40 grand on an event.
Yeah.
We have openly just discussed that on this call and said we're fundamentally against that model. It's not a revenue generator. We don't know what we're going to do with it yet, but I would be very, very surprised and uncomfortable in my job if it's going to be 100 people come into a tryout at $250 and let's walk away with 25 grand or whatever. So it's not going to be a revenue generator. It could be smaller, it could be cheaper, it could be both, but it's certainly not going to be a cash grab when we do something for the local community. And that's something that, philosophically I'm on board with. And I think from day one, the club has very much been against that model. So
I think that'll rub people the right way that are listening to this, that especially those in Fort Wayne and with kind of like the capitalism with entrenched in like the major sports league so rife. So that's like a breath of fresh air. Quick question from the member channel in the Discord: if you were to find another local town to have a USL 1 rivalry with, is there a town around you that you'd love to duel with? I know you're new to the area, but I wanted to give the channel members their question.
It depends what you class as local, right? It's actually it's Midwest, right? I mean, people think of it as like there's not really much around there, or certainly on the East Coast, that's what a lot of people think. But when you look at it, within a 2, 3, 4 hour radius, you've got a lot of soccer. You've got USL clubs, MLS clubs, loads of USL 2 clubs. Personally, I've got fond memories of traveling to Notre Dame to play in the ACC. I'd love to see a team up there, up in South Bend, maybe, or somewhere like that. I know the South Bend Lions kind of were there at one point, and but I'm new to the area, so I don't know who Fort Wayne really consider themselves to be local rival with at the moment. Obviously, Indy's already there, so. But that's
who really grinds the gear of a Fort Wayne resident? I want to see the answers pour in for that. And also, a good note in the chat that your club also has an Instagram page posted for updates on the new stadium project, and to kind of show people how the stadium is coming along. So lots of exciting stuff going on for Fort Wayne FC. They've got a brand new sporting director. They're going pro. And a new stadium is, a buzz with activity, it sounds like. So thank you for joining us here. It sounds like you're kind of really just getting dug in here. Maybe if we check in with you in the wintertime, maybe we'll have maybe another update on how it's going, the amateur to professional transition.
Yeah, I'd love it. I'd love it. I've probably got a lot more to open up on and a few more stories to tell come November, December. But yeah, anytime you want to check in, just give me a call.
All right, Oliver Gage, Sporting Director, Fort Wayne FC. Thank you so much for joining us here on Morning Kickaround.
Thanks, Ali.
See you guys. Thank you.